Welcome to Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters. I'm Michon Boston.
And I'm Tequina Boston.
We're your hosts and real-life sisters who binge on historical drama.
We'll talk about films, fictional adaptations, and dramatic series as windows to the past and mirrors of the present.
So fill your teacup or mug with your favorite sip as we explore what's fact, what's fiction, and the so what on historical drama with the Boston Sisters. I'm Michon Boston.
And I'm Tequina Boston. Welcome to Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters, where we talk about historical films and dramatic series as windows to the past and mirrors of the present. Listen to past episodes and sign up for our newsletter on our webpage at michonbostongroup.com/Boston Sisters to stay up to date on new episodes and bonus content.
When Alfie came in, that there was this kind of stigma towards him and this, let's call it curiosity towards him, because I think that's important, because that's what would happen. That's true to life. And so Grantchester did that brilliantly in addressing that. But it was also really important that we didn't make the whole series about that.
In this episode of Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters, we're very happy to be talking with actor Rishi Nair, who portrays Vicar Alphy Kottaram in the 9th season of Grantchester on PBS MASTERPIECE MYSTERY. The series is adapted from the Grantchester mystery novels by James Runcie.
In Season 9, it's 1961, and times are changing in Grantchester. After marrying best friend Geordie's niece Bonnie, Reverend Will Davenport, played by Tom Brittney, is now a father and has begun to seek new challenges elsewhere. Meanwhile, Detective Inspector Geordie Keating, played by Robson Green, and his wife Kathy, played by actor Casey Ainsworth, deal with their independent daughter Esme, portrayed by Sky DeGratola, being free in a dangerous world. It's not long before Reverend Alphy Kottaram, played by actor Rishi Nair, arrives as the new vicar, immediately enchanted by the glorious village. But will the locals ever be able to accept him as one of their own? And will Alfie be convinced that investigating murders with Geordie is part of a Grantchester vicar's ministry?
In Grantchester Season 9, it's not just the new vicar who has to deal with being treated like an outsider. The residence of the halfway house that Leonard has established is home to people who have been rejected by the larger community. Leonard's partner, Daniel, feels that he only gets acceptance because of his relationship with Leonard. There are several storylines that are about women feeling unseen and unappreciated, as well as Geordie's daughter Esme and other young women facing sexism in their workplace. When asked why he became a minister, Reverend Alphy Kottaram, the new vicar, expresses his intention to have a church that is known for peace and that is vibrant, fun, and full of all walks of life.
We begin our conversation with Rishi Nair. Rishi Nair is an actor known for British television series, including the vampire sitcom Count Abdullah, the drama series Hollyoaks, and Jim Archer's sci-fi comedy film Brian and Charles, winner of the Sundance Film Festival Audience Award in 2022. Welcome, Rishi, to Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So I have to say, when you first entered Grantchester, or when Alfie comes on the scene, I'm like, who is this guy who's coming in like James Bond? He's in this red convertible, that's Triumph convertible, and he's got this confident swagger. But one thing we learn about Alphy Kottaram is that he's British born.
Yeah.
He comes to the Grantchester village as someone who belongs, not like I'm an outsider. I belong here.
Mm-hmm.
And in various ways, the people of the village keep reminding him that he is in some way or another an other in their eyes. As you develop this character, how are you weaving in this tension between the polarities of belonging and being treated like an outsider?
Yeah, I mean, it's I think with Alfie, he is, as you said, he comes in his red Triumph with a little bit of swagger, and he is very bold. And I think it's a perfect kind of introduction to Alfie's personality and his character. He kind of, I think he's from London, which is in the 50s and 60s is much more diverse than Grantchester would be. Grantchester is a very white British town. Even today, it's a bit like that, and even more so in the 50s and 60s. So I think he knows what he's coming on into, and he kind of just approaches everything head on, full throttle. And that's where I think his kind of swagger and him coming in a sports car kind of comes from. He's not kind of afraid to approach these kind of the stigma that he knows he's going to receive. And so, yeah, and when he does come to Grantchester, we see that, there's this beautiful scene when he walks into a pub and everyone just kind of...
Yeah.
Yeah. Who are you?
Everyone just stops drinking and it goes silent and turn their heads. And his first response is, "Can I buy anyone a drink?" And I think, he knows what people's expectations are going to be of him when they see him and see this brown face. But he's trying to kind of change their minds and trying to do it in a pleasant way. And killing them with kindness, I think, is the kind of best way to describe how Alfie is approaching that.
Yeah, he's really something of a border crosser.
Mm-hmm.
And in that time, there weren't that many, I think, people who would take the kinds of bold actions he would take to connect.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Different.
And listen, I've done that myself, and friends have said, "I can't believe you just went." I'm like, "Why? It's just me."
Well, it was like the first time. First time we went to Maine too, when people said, "Are there any Black people in Maine?" It was like, yeah, well, we'll find out. Well, tell us a little more about how you prepared for the role. We talk with actors, some who create backstories, some who work mainly from the script. What is your process for creating the role?
I think for me, it kind of starts with the script. I kind of start with that first and then kind of work backwards from there, generally. But however, with this, in terms of biography, Daisy, who's the writer on the show, who's a brilliant director, gave me such a great kind of biography from the very beginning. Kind of my first self-tape that I had before, I'd even put anything on tape. It was the first time ever I'd got an audition through, and there was like 3 pages of a biography on this character. And as an actor, that's just an absolute dream, because you know exactly what they're looking for. So many times you get an audition come through and it's kind of a little paragraph or this and that, and you're like, I have no idea what they want. I could play this anyway. Whereas with this, it was kind of like, okay, I can see what they want from Alfie. This is the kind of guy he is. Kind of got the backstory from that. And that really helps from the first audition process to then getting the job, to rehearsing. I kind of already had this character in my head that Daisy had given me. And this biography that I got sent, which obviously got edited as the process went along. But before we started filming, that was always kind of my first 3 pages in my folder for my scripts. So if ever I needed a kind of reference, it was always there, and just kind of reminded me of who Alfie was and what his backstory was. So that was really helpful, because there is a lot in the series. It's a funny one. There's a lot in the biography that he has that we can't tell the audience yet. But
Right, yeah.
It's
we had
really
that feeling.
Yeah. There's secrets and stuff there that really obviously make a difference to how he approaches certain things in life, but they can't be revealed. So it's kind of like trying to show them without trying to show them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
What is
hinting.
it with these? Yeah, what is it with these vicars who come to Grantchester?
I know they've all got secrets, haven't they?
Now, we talk about Alfie coming to a new town. How about you becoming part of this ensemble cast? Some of them have been together for 8 seasons and building connections with these longtime actors who play the roles like Geordie, Mrs. C, Leonard, and Dickens.
And Dickens as well, who's been in there since series 1.
Right. We remember him as a pup.
Yeah, he's a big dog now. But no, coming into the series, like, when I first got the role, obviously you're buzzing and everything, and then before you're about to go on set, obviously I didn't do episode 1 and 2. I come in on episode 3. So the guys had been filming a few weeks before I arrived. And so like a week beforehand, you do think, because you're the new kid at school, right? You're the one joining, and they've been together for 8 years, and you're like, how am I going to fit in? Is it going to be okay? Have they got their groups? All of this goes in. But as soon as I got there, they were all honestly so lovely. They all kind of with open arms took me in, and like you said, they've been together for so many years. It is like a real family, and within the first week, I felt a real part of that family. A couple of days before I started, before we had the read through, I got a phone call from Robson. I got a phone call from Al, who plays Leonard. Tom had written to me to give me his support. You know, if I needed any help or anything, he was always there. So I really felt the love and the support. And when I got on set, it was such an incredible experience. Like anything in life, it's the people that make it.
Yeah.
And being on Grantchester, the group of people, the cast, the crew, all the producers, everything, honestly made it such a lovely family orientated kind of working style, which was really lovely.
And Dickens?
And Dickens, listen, when the days when Dickens were on set were my favorite. They were my favorite. He just brings so much joy to the set, and he's honestly, I was in awe of Dickens, because this guy can literally just hit marks, and he knows when to leave the scene, when to come onto the scene. And I was like, man, this guy's a better actor than I am. This is incredible.
We're talking about the dog, audience.
Wow.
But that also goes to the trainer. The credit goes to the trainer.
Absolutely, yeah. They're brilliant. I mean, I have no idea how they do it. And I mean, I was speaking to the trainer, and they have cats that do the same thing, and I'm like, what? That's crazy.
Yeah, that's a skill for sure.
That's a skill,
and then,
yeah.
And then afterwards, a cat will say, "I'm going to my dressing room now."
But yeah, no, Dickens bundles of joy, and he just lights up the room when he comes in, because you saw all the crew. No one wants to work when Dickens is there, because everyone just wants to play with him.
So we're excited about doing this kind of podcast in this time, because there is much more diversity in terms of storylines and characters. And our particular interest is in folks who have been underrepresented for a long time in historical drama, and also the untold stories. And because of what's happening now, there is an emerging awareness that diversity was more present in history than it was in the historical dramas. So we're curious to know, did you base your character on an actual Indian person who may have had this lived experience as a clergy in a British parish, or did you draw from any of your own family or community experiences or personal experiences?
That's a great question. I didn't base it on a specific clergy, because in all honesty, I didn't feel like I needed to. I felt like I just needed to relate to, however people treated Alfie as a clergy or vicar. I think if he was a police officer, people would have treated him the same. So it was just kind of tapping into that time in the world, being in that particular part of the country at that time. Which was much less diverse than, say, London, for example. And just trying to understand what it would have been like to be someone who looks like me in that period of time, and how everyone would have reacted to that. And I did think of stories that my grandmother told me when she first arrived in the 70s, and my dad, who arrived in the 80s. What my dad lived experiences as an Indian in the UK in the late 80s compared to me growing up here in the 90s, early 2000s was a big difference. So you can only imagine going back another 20, 30 years, how different that would have been. And so I think doing that, researching stories on the internet about people that have had lived experiences, both pleasant and non-pleasant, and just kind of not drawing upon them in terms of like picking a story and being like, that could be Alfie. It's just kind of recognizing that these things were happening around. And I think that kind of helped me kind of approach the scenes when those kind of confrontations happen, and just kind of have that in my mindset that this isn't what I've experienced growing up in the 90s and early 2000s. This is very different being in the 50s and 60s. It was a lot more in your face. Nothing was kind of hidden. No one would kind of call it out because it was more accepted back then. So yeah, I think that was kind of more of the experiences I drew on.
Yeah, like trying to inhabit a mindset of another time is a real challenge for sure.
Real, yeah. What really helped was, when my grandmother was alive, is having those conversations with her with how was it when you first came here? You couldn't speak the language, and you was just suddenly in this country, you're a brown woman and there's just white people and you can't speak the language. Like, what must have that been like? And listening to her stories of how that was. And then my father, his struggles, things that he found hard and things that he found easier than he thought he would. And, I think it's a constant case of being able to adapt. And even me with a British accent, being born in London in a very diverse city, I constantly feel like I have to adapt when I'm around certain people. If I walk into a room and I'm going for a big English play and it's, very white, I do adapt. I do adapt to kind of fit in, whether I'm doing that consciously or subconsciously, I don't know. But you do that to kind of fit into whichever kind of social group you're around. And I think that probably wouldn't have been any different back then as well. With Alfie approaching a congregation full of white people would be very different if he was approaching a congregation full of Indians,
We've talked about W.E.B. Du Bois on this podcast and the dual identity. What?
Double consciousness.
Double consciousness. And it's okay.
Yeah, it's actually a strength because particularly in the world we're living in now with so many cross-cultural interactions, it's really important to know how to, so we would say, read the room and know how to show up in different contexts.
In fact, we had a minister who would preach to our congregation in one voice or one way. And then if he went to another congregation, let's just say like a Baptist church, he would preach in a different way.
Yeah, he would adapt his style and a little bit the message, but yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? It's almost like it's a sense of identity as well, isn't it? It's like, it's such a funny thing. It's like when I'm growing up in the UK, I'm always referred to as the Indian guy, which is what I am. I'm the Indian guy. And then I go to India and I meet my dad's family and it's like, oh, the English guy's here. The English guy's here. And it's like,
yep.
Mum, where do I sit? Where do I fit in here?
Yeah.
I'm always the other person. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. You know who you are when you go abroad.
Exactly.
We're definitely American outside of the U.S. And definitely when I went to Ghana, I was not seen as like, one of the people.
Yeah. Exactly. I don't think I've ever felt more English than when I was in India.
Absolutely.
Which is so ironic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of those assumptions, Alfie's people in Grantchester seem to make assumptions about him based on his Indian heritage and those tropes we're so familiar with. They think he's a Christian convert. He gets the question, where are you from? And to be honest, we've gotten that question in certain situations.
Usually when we show up for afternoon tea at a hotel.
I mean, people assume he's a foreigner from a member country of the British Commonwealth or Empire, as Mrs. C says. One person assumes he does mission work with orphans. So we get all these tropes. We get a pretty clear background of the British East Indian colonial relationship and these interactions with Alfie. But when he is asked why he became a minister, he responds that it was either the church
or accounting.
And that he connected more with Jesus, who was, unquote, an outsider who wanted to bring people together in peace. And he goes on to say that his vision for his church is one that is vibrant, fun, and full of all walks of life. So, what do you think the Grantchester writers in this series, and you mentioned Daisy, which is set in 1961, what are they trying to say about British society today?
Yeah, I think in terms of the church, I think this is an era where I think people were kind of the new generation were kind of going away from religion and kind of rebelling against that. And so I think when Alfie talks about the church and being full of all walks of life, I think he is probably the first person that's come to Grantchester that is very happy to adapt and modernize the church, to draw young people in, to draw people from all cultures, but all walks of life. I mean, all walks of life, literally. And I think there's, as the season progresses, you see this is more season 10, but there's things that he introduces into the church that at first people are kind of like, this is not how things are done, but he is someone there that's ready to make that change. So like he sees it's a new dawn and change is coming, and he's happy to be that person to make that change. In terms of where we are in 1961, I think for a town like Grantchester, I think it's always important to differentiate Grantchester to London. I can only compare to London because that's where I'm from. That's what I've lived. And even today, when you go to Grantchester, it's a very different experience to being in London in terms of the people you see around you and all that. So I think in Grantchester in 1961, I think someone like Alfie that came to the village, those questions would 100% been there. People might have never seen a brown person in their life ever before, you know. And when I started on this series, for me, it was really important that was portrayed at the beginning, that when Alfie came in, that there was this kind of stigma towards him and this, let's call it curiosity towards him, because I think that's important, because that's what would happen. That's true to life. And so Grantchester did that brilliantly in addressing that, but it was also really important that we didn't make the whole series about that.
Right,
you know,
yeah.
It is still Grantchester, and we don't want to deviate away from that just because we've got someone like me who's playing the vicar. It's like we wanted to address that, but then we wanted to be Grantchester and carry on with the show. And I think they did that balance brilliantly well in season 9.
Yeah, I think they kept it very real in terms of what his experience would have been, how the town would have reacted to him, but also it's still this weird little village with all these murders, which is kind of interesting.
Exactly, yeah.
I'm surprised somebody isn't waving a red flag. Crime is going up at Grantchester.
I know. I mean, house prices must be so cheap in Grantchester. That many murders.
Well, interestingly, Michon and I hear clergy speak of their vocation as a calling. And we know ministers who've been interested in acting. They always seem to be kind of like curious about the
Really?
acting
That's
field.
so interesting.
And I, who majored in theater in college, but worked as kind of a organizational change person in in a faith organization. My own experience is having classmates who either are what we call PKs or preacher's kids, and or have siblings who are in the ministry. So it's like you find these families where there's an actor and there's a minister. When did you know that you had a calling to be an actor? And now that you're in this vicar role in Grantchester, what relationship do you see between the stage and the pulpit?
Yeah, I think it's to your first question, my calling as an actor. Do you know, I've been asked this question before, and I don't think there was a specific moment where I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. I want to be an actor. I just remember like growing up as a kid, loved watching movies. And every time you would kind of see the lead man on screen, and I would always just think, oh, I would love to do that. I would love that to be me, And then kind of when it came to crunch time, so we have a thing called sixth form here, which is kind of like college, maybe for you, or when I was about 16 years old. And you've got to decide what you want to kind of do. I used to always love doing drama at school. It kind of felt like a bit of a cheat subject. I was like, how is this on par with like chemistry and maths? Like, I'll always pick drama. And so I did that. And then when I kind of got older and realized people make a career out of this, I was like, I would love to give that a go. But I was also very conscious that the people that I was seeing on screen that were playing these lead actors that I wanted to be like, none of them looked like me. So I knew that me wanting to do this was a really high risk move. I mean, it's a high risk move for anyone, but I think being an Indian actor when I was watching these stuff in the 2000s, there was no one that looked like me. And I didn't want to put all my eggs in a basket. So I went to university and I studied a degree in something completely separate. And once I graduated from that, I then thought, okay, I'm going to try and work as an actor. And it was tough. It was tough. The first kind of 4-5 years was a lot of working for free, doing student projects, just to, media projects that had to film something. They needed actors. I would go and do that for free, just get a bit of footage and kind of put little reels together and send them to agents. And that was my first kind of 4 or 5 years of acting, really. It was just really trying to hustle my way through the industry. So I think it was that was my calling as an actor, a culmination of all those kind of experiences. And in response to your second question and similarities between them, it is quite similar, isn't it? I mean, they're both on stage, whether you're a vicar or let's say you're an actor doing a play. You're on stage, you're performing to an audience. They both need to be engaging. They need to be entertaining to a certain extent.
Absolutely.
You don't want to be boring. And I guess they're both sending a message, aren't they? Whether you're a vicar and you're reading a passage from the Bible about a story, that story has a message. There's a meaning to it, as is when you're doing a play. Every story that you're telling, there's a reason you're telling that story, and there's a message there. And so I think they're the original influences.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I also want to say you deliver your sermon very well. Sermons.
Oh, thank you.
That
was, you know what? That was a hard one to fill because before I did that, I went and I went into church on a few Sundays to see how people were delivering their sermons. And I don't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing because I watched one and he was really great. And then I went and watched another one and she was brilliant in such another way. And then I was like, oh God, I could do this way or that way, like really passionately. And then I thought, okay, just screw it. Just do it how you think Alfie would do it. And just, yeah.
Yeah. Your journey as an actor is interesting because it actually is similar to the journey of a lot of ministers I know who are often second career people. They did something else and there was a hesitancy. In fact, one of my minister friends said, if you don't want to run in the other direction, it's not a real calling. So,
and in the words of Shakespeare, all the world is a stage, including the pulpit.
Absolutely.
Rishi, we're at our lightning round. That's the part of the podcast where we ask guests questions related to the themes of historical drama with the Boston sisters. So we have 2 questions, and I will ask the first. Are you ready?
Do I need to respond quickly? Do I? Is this
no? You can. Nobody does.
Oh. Okay, cool.
The first question: if you could time travel, what time would you visit and why?
Ooh. Such a good question. Definitely go back in time. I have no interest in going to the future. Going back seems cool. Do you know what? I will pick the 60s, the swinging 60s. It seemed like such a cool time. It seemed like people were kind of letting loose, having fun. Going out seemed fun. I love the dress sense in that era. So yeah, I think where Grantchester is now, I would love to be in that era.
I'd love to be in that car for sure.
Yeah, I thought Triumph only made motorcycles.
I mean, I had no idea. Do you know what? It's actually a pretty good drive. I mean, it's a really old car, but it drives really, really well. And yeah, when we were kind of cut for filming breaks and stuff, I was just taking it for a spin round the block again and again.
Well, our second question is, what 3 items would you put in a time capsule that reflect the history you've lived through?
Oh, these are tough questions. Okay. I would put, so 3 items I would put in today so the future could look back and say, this is what they had back then.
Yeah, this was
kind of
Rishi's
thing.
life.
Oh, gosh. Oh my God. I want this to be good. I don't want it to be bad. So I think I would have, for me as Rishi, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I would put my football boots in there because football has been a massive part of my life from when I was a kid to now. You know, I need to play football like twice a week, just mentally, physically. So that's a big part. I'm sure that I'll have some super duper football boots in the future, and they'll probably look at this and be like, "What the hell? They used to play football in these."
Yeah, how did they do it?
Exactly. So I'll put that in there. I would put the DVD of The Godfather in there because that is my favorite film.
Oh.
And that is probably the film that I've watched the most amount of times. They probably wouldn't know what to do with it. I mean, I don't think kids today would know what to do with the DVD, but I'd put that in there. And my third one, any item. Oh, God. I think do you know what? I'm known for whenever I go out and I see people always make a comment that I'm always carrying a water bottle with me at all times. So I'll put my water bottle in there. I think that sums me up. Not the most interesting, but there you go.
That's who you are.
Yeah.
That's who
You'll
I am.
have to listen to our podcast about The Godfather. We did the 50th anniversary.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
I will have to listen to that for sure. Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Rishi, for joining us on Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters to introduce the new Grantchester vicar, Alphy Kottaram.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, guys.
The 9th season of Grantchester and other Masterpiece mystery dramas broadcast Sunday nights on PBS. You can also stream the series on PBS Passport, the PBS Masterpiece Prime Video channel, and for free for 14 days from broadcast on pbs.org/masterpiece.
We invite you to share this episode of Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters with someone you know who would enjoy the conversation. Subscribe to Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters and enjoy past episodes wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. If you listen on Apple, please leave a review. If you're listening on Spotify, we hope you'll give us a 5-star rating. Sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date on future episodes and bonus content. You can also write us at podcast@michonbostongroup.com. Like and share Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters on your social media.
This is Michon Boston.
And this is Tequina Boston.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters, a podcast about historical films and series dramas. Visit our webpage at michonbostongroup.com/Boston Sisters.
Tell us what historical dramas you're watching. Who knows? We may do a show about it. Sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the podcast, and share it with the people you know who binge on historical drama.
Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters is brought to you by the Michon Boston Group. The views and opinions expressed on Historical Drama with the Boston Sisters are those of the speakers and do not represent the positions or views of the Michon Boston Group, its clients, or affiliates. This is Michon Boston.
And this is Tequina Boston. Thank you for listening.